Hey everybody! I haven't tried them all, but for my money, elk meat is the king of wild game meats. So when someone offers me some elk in exchange for making some sausage, I am gonna jump on it every time. And that is what has happened today. My friend Rose got herself a big old bowl and she would like some summer sausage. And even though I've made a few types of summer sausage on the channel before, I'm doing another because Rose craves a big, thick sausage. So today, I'm making this delicious elk summer sausage that everyone's gonna love. So let's get started. This meat has already been ground, which is not ideal because I lose control over the grind and I have to guess at how much fat, if any, the processor has added in. So let's get into this and take a look at what I'm working with. Well, definitely a little bit of fat in there, not a ton. I'll actually go cook up a little piece of this and see how juicy it is. The grind, fairly fine, but not too fine to make a good summer sausage, so I think we are in good shape. All right, let's give this a little try. See how juicy that is. Oh yeah. Ooh, that's good. Well, that is nice and juicy, so I'm gonna guess they've gone 15% on this fat. So I'll add in around another 10% to get that up there. But that is some nice meat. No funk at all on that elk meat. So now I'll get a total weight on that lean meat and then I'll dig out that pork fat and we'll grind that down. Some of you have had questions about the equipment I use for making sausages. And since I've made summer sausages before and I will make them again, I'll take this opportunity to talk about some of that equipment. And the first thing, very important for me, are kitchen scales. And you're gonna want two sizes. You're gonna want one that goes up to 10, maybe 20 pounds, depending on the batches you're gonna be doing. And then you're gonna want a little gram scale for all your herbs, spices, and cure. When I'm making these sausage, I always go off weight rather than volumetric measurements like cups and spoons. I do my best to translate into that for the recipes, but it is much easier when you start using weights and percentages. I've got nearly enough fat right here to get the job done, but I'm a couple hundred grams short, so I'm gonna supplement with some bacon fat. You can always use bacon fat. I don't use it very frequently except for just like I'm doing today to make up a little bit of slack because it will alter the flavor of your sausage. But if you're smoking a pork sausage, it's not gonna make much of a difference. So bacon fat's always good to use, and I go and buy the odd cut ends and pieces and I just look for the fattiest bag I can find. So I'll get this chunked up for the grinder and then I'll pop it in the freezer for a little bit to firm it up before running through the grinder. I may need to run some of that elk meat along with it to keep it pushing through nice and smooth because this stuff's gonna be pretty slickery. We'll just see how it goes. Now my fat is all firmed up and icy cold, so it is time to break out gnarls and grind that down. And gnarls is an LEM number 12 big bite grinder. And for my purposes, it really gets the job done. I used to use a little number 8 grinder and that worked well when I wasn't making sausage so frequently. But once you start getting into making lots of sausage, big batches of sausage, and breaking down your own animals, you're really gonna wanna step that up to something a little beefier. And with the number 12, If I'm working alone, I can't keep up with the grinder, so it works just fine. So I keep all these pieces in the freezer so they stay nice and cold. And good cold blades, good cold meat, that's gonna give you a nice clean grind. It'll really slice through the meat rather than kind of smushing it through there. So I'm gonna see how this fat runs through here on its own. Like I said, I might have to add in a little bit of lean to help push that through. And I'll definitely throw in some of that pre-ground meat to get the last bits of fat out of the grinder. And I'll be running it through a 4.5 millimeter plate. And that grind is really up to you when you're making a sausage. For something coarse like this, one pass is usually fine. If I was making something a little more refined, I might put a double grind on there. Summer sausage is a broad term that covers a wide variety of cured, semi-dry sausages, and the salt and cure are the only two requisite ingredients. After those, a summer sausage can be anything you want as far as seasoning goes. If you want a bit of Italian zest, you might use some fennel and oregano, or maybe you want that Mexican flair and you can throw in some cumin and chili powder. If rectal trauma is your thing, get in there with some Reaper peppers. There is a whole wide world of herbs and spices out there, and the combinations are limitless. So experiment with them and create your own unique recipes. That is the beauty of making your own. Because I'm making this one for someone other than myself, it comes with certain expectations and ideas of what a summer sausage is. And for this one, I've got some black peppercorns. I've got whole mustard seeds that I'm gonna leave whole because I like when you bite into them and they give you a little pop and a little burst of mustardy flavor, like a spicy caviar. I've got some whole coriander that I have toasted, and I'm gonna grind that up, which brings me to the next piece of equipment that I regularly use, and that is just a cheap coffee grinder. Whenever possible, I like to grind my spices fresh. They're just much more flavorful and aromatic that way, and a coffee grinder gets the job done. I've got some pre-ground allspice. Normally I would grind that fresh as well, but I just keep losing my berries. I'm using some garlic powder today, and there's always a debate on whether to use fresh garlic or garlic powder. So right here and now, I am gonna state that when you're making a fresh sausage, use fresh garlic. If you're making a cooked sausage, use garlic powder. And now that is a rule, an edict handed down from the king. Binder is optional in this sausage, and I'm gonna put in some regular non-fat powdered milk. If you're lactose intolerant, you can go ahead and leave that out and it's gonna work pretty well, or you could use a variety of other binders. Summer sausage usually has a little bit of tartness to it, sometimes a lot of tartness, and traditionally that is done through fermentation, and I've got a couple of videos on that if you'd like to check those out and go with that route. But today I'm gonna be using the easy method, and that is by adding encapsulated citric acid. And it's important that you use encapsulated citric acid and not this type of citric acid that you would use for canning tomatoes. This one is, just like the name says, encapsulated, meaning that the citric acid is coated with a waxy or oily type of coating formed into these little pellets that don't break down until your sausage comes up to temperature. That way the citric acid isn't going to be in there breaking down your meat for a long time, and that could really affect the texture of your sausage. And that also means that this is not a cure accelerator. This doesn't do anything until that coating melts, and that's going to happen pretty close to the time when your sausage is finished. I nearly forgot to mention that when you're using the encapsulated citric acid, you want to hold off on that and add it into your meat just before you get that into the casings. This stuff's going to cure overnight, and if I put these in there now, there is a chance that that long exposure to moisture will cause some of those to break down and release the citric acid. So you're best just putting that in right before you get those stuffed and out into the smoker. So we'll hold off on that one. We'll mix up the rest of this stuff. It's time to mix this one up, and for that I've got another LEM product. They are not a sponsor, but as far as I'm concerned, that's their loss. Message me. And that is this 20-pound manual mixer. And for the sake of time, I will just say that when you are making a smoked sausage like this, you really need to mix the heck out of it until it gets really nice and sticky. That's going to let you know that you're going to have a good bind. And in this, that's going to take 5 or 10 minutes. If you're doing it by hand, that's going to take you 15 or 20 minutes. So we'll get all this meat down into there. And the spices again, I'm leaving out the citric acid for now. And we're going to need a little bit of liquid in here to help with the mixing. And that can be anywhere from 5 to 15% of the weight of the meat. My rule is that the narrower the sausage you're making, the more liquid you're going to need, because that's going to loosen things up a little bit and help you get that down and through your stuffer. This is a very large gauge sausage, so I'm only going to use 5%, and I'm just using water today, but beer or wine work very, very well. Now this goes out into the refrigerator overnight to let that cure work its magic, and we will be back here bright and early on another Sausage Sunday to crank out this seasonal sausage. And we are back on another beautiful Sausage Sunday to crank out this summer sausage. And now it is time to get in there with the encapsulated citric acid. And depending on how tangy you want your sausage, you can use this at a rate of anywhere between 0.5% and 1% of the weight of the meat. And that is really close to 1/2 to 1 teaspoon per pound. And I'll just mix this one in by hand. I don't need to mix it as hard as I did that initial mixing. I just want to get it thoroughly spread around in the meat. For casings today, I am using these fibrous casings, and these are the 1 pound size, and you can either use these natural colored ones or the smoky colored ones. But these do need a brief soak before you stuff them in some warm water, so we'll get those going. And then once I get them stuffed, I'll be closing them off with these hog ring pliers and some little hog rings. It's just a little bit easier than tying them all off. And my stuffer is another LEM product. This is a 10-pound dual gear stuffer. It's got a high-speed stuffer that you mainly use for getting that thing set up and down to wherever your meat is, and then a low-speed gear that gives you a bunch more torque for cranking those things out. And now my casings are ready, my meat is ready, my stuffer is ready, and my corn pop is ready.
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
So now it is time to lock and load and crank out these bugling brats. the summer sausages hanging out to dry for a little while and begin coming up to temperature. It's pretty warm in there right now. I got it at about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Got the fan under them. Just want to get these things all dried out and start bringing them up to temperature very slowly. And in the meantime, let's go take a look at the smoker. Of all the questions I get about the equipment I use, by far and away most are about the smokers that I use. And I've got a couple of them here, neither of which is a very fancy smoker. I tend to go for the tallest smoker that I can get at the lowest price. And each of these does have some benefits and drawbacks. First, I've got this 44-inch propane-powered smoker, which is the one that I generally use for smoking sausages. And the reason for that is that with the propane smoker, I've just got these knobs that I can adjust the flame up or down anywhere that I like, giving me an infinite range of control on the temperature. Now you compare that to the electric smoker I have here, and this one does have those preset temperatures, and those don't always line up with the sausage I'm making. However, the gas smoker is very thin-walled. No insulation whatsoever in here, so outside temperatures and wind really affect it, and you gotta keep a closer eye on this thing than you do with the electric smoker. Now, I did upgrade this with this temperature monitor. It's got Bluetooth so I can keep an eye on the temperature anywhere I am on the property, and it also has some temperature probes that connect to it that I can run in the sausage. So that thing has helped out quite a bit. Another drawback to the gas smoker is that when I'm running a very low flame, it doesn't generate a lot of smoke. It does alright, it'll make a pretty good sausage, but if I want something smokier, like the sausage I'm making today, I've got this little smoke generator that I will hook up and run it in through the side of there to get some extra smoke, especially down in the earlier stages of cooking these. As far as the electric smoker goes, the benefit is it is more convenient, and this one does have a little bit of insulation to it, so it'll hold the temperature better. However, I can't really hit the very low temperatures that I want to hit in the beginning stages, other than on the very coldest days of the year. With the gas smoker, I can crack the door open a little bit and keep it down at those low temperatures. But if I do that with this one, it's just constantly fighting to get to the temperature where it wants to be rather than the temperature where I want it to be. And the way it works is that it comes up to the temperature where it's set, and then it'll slowly dip down, and then it kicks on and comes back up to the temp, so you do get this kind of wave of heating and cooling, which is not ideal. You can still make really good sausages in this thing, but when I want them dialed in perfectly, I go through the extra effort and use the gas smoker. Now, this one does have thicker walls, so it's got a bit of insulation. It'll hold the temperature a little better, but it does do that little wave thing. It's not extreme. It's manageable, but most of the time I use this for cooking. You know, things like ribs and chicken and briskets. Works perfectly for those things. And the temperature monitor, I just switch back and forth from smoker to smoker. You can just remove the face off of this and switch it from smoker to smoker if you've got a second base, but that's just an extra cost that I don't have the means for right now, so I switch the whole thing back and forth. So I hope that answers any and all of your questions about the smokers. And you can really get away with just about anything. It's just a matter of how much attention you're going to have to pay to whatever you got cooking in there. So now I'm going to get the big gas boy fired up, and we'll get those summer sausages out and into some smoke. Once your casings are nice and dry, you're good to move these things out into your smoker and start smoking them. And the key to making good sausages like this is to bring the temperature up very gradually so you get nice even cooking and don't develop any kind of a hard rind on the outside of your sausage. So what you're going to want to do is start them at very, very low temperature. I start mine at 130 degrees Fahrenheit and get the smoke going. And depending on the size of the sausage and how smoky I want, I'm gonna adjust the time that I leave them down at low temperature. I want these to be pretty smoky. They're a big, thick sausage, so they can take quite a bit of smoke. So I'm gonna start them down at 130, leave them there for an hour and a half, maybe up to 2 hours. Then I'm gonna raise it to 140 and do the same thing. And then once again, I'll raise it to 150 degrees Fahrenheit to finish the smoking phase. And I'll leave them at that 150 temperature until they dry out a little bit and get a little more dense. So that could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours with a sausage like this. After that smoking time is all completed, we move into the cooking stage. And big guys like this, I don't finish in the smoker anymore. I'll move them into a water bath at that point to finish them off. But if you are finishing them in the smoker, raise it up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, get a temperature probe in there, and then cook them off to an internal temperature of between 152 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit. I generally take them to 155, so if there's any size difference, I can be sure that they've all hit at least 152. At that point, you just got to be very careful that you don't overheat them. If they get into that 170, 180 degree Fahrenheit range internal, the fat is going to start running out and you're going to ruin your sausage. So I'm not going to be checking in on every phase in this video because it's already going to be too long. So once these get to the point where I want to finish cooking them off, we'll get back here and get these down into that water bath. My 6-hour smoke time is done. And everything's looking good in here. Not all shriveled up or sweating out too bad. So now it's time to cook these off. And you could finish these in the smoker by raising the temperature to 180 degrees and cooking those off to that internal temperature somewhere between 152 and 155. But that can take a very long time, and I don't have that kind of time. So I get them out of here, and I'm going to get them down into a sous vide water bath. And this is my water bath. This is an Anova sous vide circulator. And I did break the clamp on there recently, so I've had to kind of rig this up. But it seems to be holding steady. So I'm going to set this to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll put the sausages directly in here. No need to bag those up. And I'll cook them to an internal temperature of 155. And if you're thinking the whole point of these sous vide circulators is so that you can set them to the temperature you want the thing to be finished at and then just forget about it, that is often the case, but not with sausages. I set the temperature higher than I want them to be so they finish cooking quickly without losing a lot of juice. If you set it down to 155, it's just going to take them longer to come up to temperature, and you will see the juices running out of them. And I want to preserve them just like they are now. So once I get them in here, they're going to cook very quickly. It usually takes 15 to 20 minutes as opposed to several hours out in the smoker. So I want to get them down in there, get some temperature probes in there, which are another indispensable piece of equipment. I've got all kinds of them. Wired, wireless, Bluetooth, handheld, of course. I've probably got 10 of these things. And since they're gonna cook so quickly, as soon as I get them down in here, I'll get my ice bath ready, because as soon as they hit that internal temperature, you wanna get them out of the hot water and cooled off just as quickly as possible to stop any carryover cooking. There we go. Right down into the water bath, like I said. I'm going to be doing a couple of batches today because they're different sizes and I've got quite a few of them. So now I want to get my temperature probe into one of these. Ooh. And I'm going to push that right down into the middle of it. And yes, I go in through the side like this and not all the way down and through the end, because most people don't know that on most of these probes, the sensor part is right in the tip. So that's all that you've got to get into the center of your sausage. And if you go in through the end, you're just gonna have a big hole in every slice. And I'm not trying to make holy sausage. All right, we are there. It took 20 minutes, right about where I expected it to. So now we get those right down into the ice. I will leave these in the ice for around 15 minutes. In the meantime, I can get batch number 2 going. And there they are. Nothing left to do now but get them nice and dried off. And then you can seal them up, freeze them, do whatever you like with them. I gotta go to work now, so we're gonna let these hang out for about 12 hours and then we'll give them a try. And now it is finally time to see how we did. Let's take a look at what we've got here. Oh yeah, that is a thing of beauty. I can see those mustard seeds popping, my black pepper, all my little pearls of pork fat. That looks absolutely perfect. Of course, what really matters is the taste. Check out that bite. Oh yeah. For me, this is just about as good as it gets. It might seem like a shame to reduce such an impressive animal down to a little tube of meat, but when you taste this, you're just gonna be more impressed with that bull. The spices are right on the nose for a standard summer sausage flavor, and I did go on the low end with that citric acid, so it's just got a little hint of that tartness. This is really all about the elk. You can make summer sausage with just about any meat you want, but elk is Mother Nature at her best. The real shame is that I have to share this with Rose. So I hope I've answered any equipment questions you have, and I will put links to everything in the description of the video. My specific gas smoker isn't being manufactured anymore, but I'll try and find a comparable option. And before I get out of here, one last question that I've gotten a lot is about this cutting board. This is a maple burl cutting board, and it was made by a family friend and gifted to me many years ago. I think at this point it might be considered an heirloom. But I've been cutting on this thing for at least 25 years, and it really hasn't worn down a bit. So while they are pretty spendy, I can recommend maple burl for a great cutting board or chopping block. And please keep dropping any questions you have down in the comments. I will do my best to get to them. And whether you're just getting started making sausage or you're a well-seasoned dog, give this one a try, and I know you're gonna love it. Thanks for watching.